AJ, Meaghan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. When you did the countdown, I just about started to fall into my hypnotherapy session.
Meditation.
So you almost lost me there right at the beginning.
It's nice to know you're using the app enough, AJ.
That's right.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. We're excited to be on.
Hey, well, again, thank you guys so much for coming on. And the reason I wanted to have you both on is that interest in data. And obviously we know each other and I've seen how your business is based around data, but you've also based your lives pretty much around utilizing data effectively to make things better. And how did it get started? What's the story behind this?
Oh, we openly call you data nerds, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Uh-huh.
We do. It's a positive thing.
But we're nerds in a different way because AJ is very high level. He likes using data to take decisions and to make decisions. And he likes using it as a foundation for justifying his, kind of gut decisions. Where I like to be in the weeds. I like to be in the data itself. So we have very different backgrounds, I guess.
But the story really started when we first started dating. I had a marketing agency. That was a data-driven marketing agency. And Meaghan and I started kind of slowly working together, as a lot of couples do in an entrepreneurial situation. And slowly but surely, I saw her value, she saw my value, and we literally have like the other piece of each other's brain. It goes together so well. And data is that kind of common bond that allows us to communicate really well together and to help other people really well.
Just for the listeners out here that have already tuned out because they don't associate with data or they're not interested in data at all. Data is simply information, right? So we have this passion for education and for knowledge and for understanding, really. And AJ constantly is striving to have more wisdom, right? And wisdom is simply the application of knowledge. And knowledge is simply the collection of data, right? It's being able to have more and more information and then be able to take action from that or learn from that information, right? And so when it comes to data, we use it in every aspect of our lives. We're both very health conscious. When we first started dating, he was very data driven in his health and in his physical performance. So he would track everything that he put into his body, all of his meals. He would track all of his workouts. He would track his weight. He would go and get DEXA scans and track his body fat percentage, right? And all of those were simply feedback mechanisms for him to understand what was and wasn't working in his body, blood tests, things like that, right? So that was all just data that he was collecting in order to spot these correlations, these patterns and these anomalies so that he could figure out what would make him healthier or less healthy, right? And for every person, it's a little bit different, right? But he was able to analyze that and then optimize it based on his goals and what he wanted to do. Whereas for us in different ways, we use data in our business. And we actually run a business intelligence agency. So we're in data all the time. But, internally as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we get caught up in the business, right? Working in the business and not on the business. And so a lot of teams that we work with, they know a couple metrics that they're working towards, right? But then they rarely take time to go back and review all of the insights that they have access to, right? And people nowadays really, they associate data with big data. And the problem with that is that when you associate big data with that kind of enterprise level look and feel, it instantly puts a distance between you and big data. But in today's society, that's not true. Big data exists on our cell phone devices. We have so much data that's tracking constantly. Every website that we go to has cookies and pixels that are tracking, right? And we rarely think about, as small business owners, how we can utilize the information that we already have tracking in some of our systems and use that to make better decisions.
And where do you think that's coming from? Do you think that's that they just don't understand how to use it or they're uncomfortable with it?
One, I think people are overwhelmed. A lot of people, failed math class and they just do not do well with numbers. So anything around numbers or taking the time to sit and work on the business, looking at numbers or spreadsheets, it's a turnoff. And it's like, oh, well, I'll pay somebody else to do it, or I'm just going to put it off. So one, I think it's overstimulation. It's too confusing. And then also we aren't educated to do this. None of us go to school to be data scientists. Very few of us. Those people are rock stars right now. Those are the people we employ to help our company become better and bring better results to our clients. But many of us aren't taught to do this kind of stuff. So that's why Meaghan mentioned the education. it's all about knowledge. It's all about understanding data is just information, and you got to take it in little chunks.
Yeah. And I think that one of the big things is, I think you're right, Elliot. I think that people don't know what to do with data, right? And so it just stops them in their tracks. I think it's because of what AJ was saying is they have this feeling or this stigma about data, and they're just like, oh, it's too complex, it's too hard, or it's not for me. But if they were to just take a step back and completely step away from that preconceived notion and just look at data as a story. Numbers never lie. They always tell a story. You just might not want to hear that story, right?
I think that's definitely a big part of it for people, actually. I think if you don't look at the numbers, you can tell yourself whatever you want, can't you?
You can go down a whole rabbit hole of stories and not believe it. And that's one of our values is transparency in our company. So what looking at the data does is there's no way around it. I mean, this is the number. This is it. So some people literally will avoid that. So there's those people who will avoid.
They're actively,
and
living in denial.
Business owners will do that sometimes. That's where they are in their journey.
But what we've seen is the people that are willing to dive in and ask the important questions, right? What's working and what's not working? Those are the companies that are really setting themselves apart from their competition, right? I mean, you think about back in the early 90s, there could be two mom and pop shops and they could both be selling the same thing. And if one of them was able to, get online and create a website and capitalize on the .com boom, they were head and shoulders above their competition, and that other shop's out of business now. We saw that with Barnes & Noble, with Blockbuster, right? And yet today that is happening right now under our noses, and people are turning their cheek towards it, right? Data is becoming more and more relevant because if you're not looking at the data in your business, your competitors are. And they're looking at what kind of ads are they running that are working? What kind of ads are they running that are not working? What kind of internal operations are yielding a higher profit margin? And which ones are slowing down the ship, right? And it could be simple things, just like looking at your payroll, looking at your project management systems. It could be looking at your inventory and your shipping. It could be looking at fulfillment and operations, or it could be looking at marketing and sales, right? But if you're not looking at even a fraction of this stuff, then you're losing out because basically you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? You're hoping and guessing. And a lot of companies out there have great products and they've been able to accidentally make money, right? They're successful despite themselves. But if they were to just look at what they've done and go back and say, wow, actually, it's Pareto's principle. 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts. And we're seeing that more and more and more. And the data is telling us where that 20% is. So these companies that are actually taking the time and investing in analyzing what's working and not working, they're then doubling down on what's working. And then they're quadrupling their revenue because of that, and it's not an increase in effort. It's not an increase in spend. It's an increase in knowledge, and it's separating the market drastically.
For any of the listeners who might be an entrepreneur or a CEO who are starting to feel a bit uncomfortable as they're hearing all of this, what is the starting point for someone if they're currently just sort of running their business blind, I guess, to an extent? They're not aware of all of this information. What's the next step for someone in that position?
One of the quotes we like to say is your output is only as good as your input, which means it all starts with tracking. Track. Now, with the starting point, that doesn't mean track all of the things. We're not saying that you need to do all of the exports and all the softwares. We need to focus on what is leading with revenue. So we always believe that marketing and sales drive business. Driving revenue usually can fix the rest of the problems. So we like to focus on sales and marketing. So what is it that you're doing in your business right now that's working? Are you running ads? Is it referrals? Where are you getting this business? Like, just understanding where your current people are coming from is a great starting point. Usually softwares like CRMs, Shopify, like if you're an e-commerce company, you're going to have that data being collected already for you automatically.
If we're looking at like a dashboard as an output or a chart as an output, right, that tells you what action to go and take, that has to be pulling from somewhere. And a lot of people have these systems that they've paid for that they're utilizing to track part of their data and part of the information. And then their team hasn't been trained on, hey, you know what would be really helpful is if you fill out this field as well. right? And implementing standard operating procedures for people to just track more information. Because the more information you track on the front end, the more you'll be able to analyze on the back end. And that's the problem that we see with a lot of small business owners is they skip that tracking part and they're like, oh, I'll implement that later. Oh, we're too small to care about that now. But then the problem is by the time you do want to go back and analyze the data, you don't have data.
You have some of it. You have a story, but there's pieces missing. Almost like a bucket of water, but there's holes that are just pouring out. Mm-hmm. And so to get that really a little more specific, if you're a sales-driven company, you could have Salesforce or Zoho CRM or whatever that may be. But what Meaghan's saying is that sometimes people will skip over these one or two little fields that they should have literally taken 2 seconds to type into or click the button of. And because they weren't trained to do that or they don't think it's important, those are the missing pieces that will tie where that person came from to the channel, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or wherever they came from. That's important information. And if it's missing, you can't just go back and figure that out usually.
Yeah, imagine being a company and having no idea who your best customers are or where they came from, right? If you knew, if you're in real estate business and 80% of your business came from, let's say, martial artists, I don't know. Wouldn't it be helpful to know that? Because then you can go and target those people, right? If those are the people that you're naturally doing well with, that you're naturally closing, that are naturally liking your products or your services, why wouldn't you want to know that in order to help you in the future get more people like that? And that's all it is. It's just tracking and writing those things down. And it can be manual or it can be in a system. It can be in Google Analytics, setting up tracking to figure out where people are going on your website, where they're clicking and not clicking, what they're reading and not reading, because that helps you understand, right? And just gives you more information. So tracking is the foundation for data. It's the number one step that even if you're not ready for big data or for dashboards or for even just analyzing the data, just start tracking it. And then in 2 years, guess what? When you are ready for that, it's all there. And then you can start seeing those patterns and correlations.
Then on the marketing side, some of the other starting points would be Google Analytics. It's a fantastic tool. And maybe some of you have heard of it or maybe not, but it's free. At least one version of it is. And it's got a tremendous amount of value, but it's not something you should go learn yourself. So we highly recommend utilizing this amazing tool, getting it set up on your website, but having someone professionally install it. Mm-hmm. Because just putting the code on the website, whether it's just a mom and pop business card type website or it's a sales driven e-commerce site, you've got to have this tracking code on there, but it also has to be set up to be customized to track your journey of your customers. Our company does this as well. We do audits. We help people set it up right so that their tracking is good. So setting up Google Analytics, setting up Google Tag Manager, and also if you're doing any sort of advertising, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or any of those other platforms, there are these things called pixels, tracking pixels that you also have to install on the page. So that may sound very technical. It kind of is, but these are some of the basics that you need to be tracking for your marketing website, anything you're doing online.
Yeah, and it'll help tenfold in a year or two when you're asking these important business questions and deciding where you're going to spend your next $10,000 in marketing dollars.
Yeah, and the good news is you don't have to buy or hire a IT team anymore. There's no real, unless you're a huge company, there's no such thing as an IT department. A lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small teams either outsource to companies like us, which already have the data people to work with, or they have somebody who is an admin that is tech savvy that can do a lot of this stuff once they're trained and they kind of understand it. So this isn't a massive undertaking. It's just doing these small things right now up front that will become substantially amazing results later on.
And when you think about the sort of changes you've seen in businesses who've gone from no real tracking to pretty substantial tracking and really understanding what's going on in their marketing journey, what sort of changes have you seen for those businesses?
Yeah, it speeds up time to value and it speeds up the scalability of businesses. I mean, imagine having two companies side by side that are doing the exact same thing and one of them understands what works and doesn't work and then starts doing it sooner. They're just going to reap the rewards a lot quicker. So that's what we've seen is just these companies that are like, oh yeah, we're like 5 years away from 50 million in annual revenue. And then they start analyzing what's worked for them and start doubling down on that. And then all of a sudden they're there within 12 months. And like we had no idea that this kind of scalability was possible, but it's very, very, very simple. It's just seeing where that 20% was that was yielding the 80% of results. And then they're just doing more of that. They're understanding their target demographic better. They're understanding what their purchase habits are of their customers. And then they're just increasing that, right? They're figuring out what is helping people become better indoctrinated into their products or services, what's helping them understand their value. And then they're just doing more of that. And it's really just been awesome. I mean, we've seen companies where we started working with them. They had some very specific business questions that they weren't getting answers to from their team. So we went through their data, we answered all of those questions, and it was like a huge light bulb went off where they were spending X amount to acquire a customer on Facebook, and they did not realize that these customers that were coming in were actually staying with them for a very long time, and that they were purchasing a lot later on down the road within 30, 60, 90 days. So what that allowed them to do was allowed them to increase their allowable cost per acquisition. And literally within 2 weeks of them getting just one simple value or one number called the lifetime value of customers, they were able to grow this one product from 15 sales a day. 2 weeks later, they were at 250 sales a day. And by 4 weeks later, they were at 615 sales a day. And that's just with one number.
I mean, that's almost embarrassing, isn't it? How much their business has changed.
And to think even more so because they were actually about to cut that funnel.
Yeah.
Meaning, wow, this isn't working. We're going to eliminate it. What if they had done that? I mean, it's completely changed their business and that perspective that they had about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So they went and started repeating that every other place in their business.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely outstanding. But another thing that we see is the word relief, because we're talking about all the optimization on the positive side, but also there's a relief from these entrepreneurs and people that once they see where they've been wasting so much time, energy, and money by not seeing the data, it's just mind blowing to them. They're like, oh my God, we spent so much time and money and energy and resources going down this road and thinking it was working, but it really wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so what we really want to help, the problem we solve is eliminating waste so that you don't have to go down those roads. Don't focus on the 80%. Cut those things out and focus on those 20% or 10% that are laser focused, that actually are working and expanding those, which are higher profit, and you don't have to have as many team members, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that data is not only on the optimization side, but the elimination of waste. We just see relief in people's attitudes and their smiles, mm-hmm. and they actually have joy that comes out of the relief. So that's the other side of it.
I would guess that with this extra data as well, it's probably more compelling for investors. If you're getting to that next stage where you're seeking funding, my assumption would be with a sort of narrative that you're actually creating through numbers rather than just how you believe your business is running. That must be far more compelling.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we've got so many VC firms that we work with who come in and say, oh, I wish I had this for all of my companies. And then we go in and we do it for all of their companies because numbers never lie. Again, they tell a story. And if they were able to have these numbers ahead of time, they would cut their losses too. They wouldn't invest in companies that didn't have that great potential. But they'd also be able to see those ones that did have that. So we see that time and time again, either companies that are looking for that VC capital or companies that just got funded and they're like, okay, so where are these big opportunities that we should focus on and where are the ones that we should cut in order to really make all that money back?
For those smaller companies, Elliot, on that same point, many of these investors will come into a smaller business and they'll have a team. If the company's not prepared, like they'll spend months sometimes working with the business owners and the team to like get all the data restructured mm-hmm. and found, which wastes everybody's time. But if you are prepared and you've got at least maybe half your data together and you've got your numbers accurate and you've got some of the financial reports, the marketing, the sales in order, then
everything's easier.
They're going to come in and be like, wow, okay, you're going to go to the top of the list because we see your numbers already. We don't have to invest all this time, money, energy, which VC firms and those investors do have the budget for that. But if you don't have to spend it and you're ready to go, don't you think they're going to be that much more interested in investing?
Moving on a little bit from the business side of things, you mentioned you're using it in your health and fitness. What sort of impact have you found of really utilizing that data fully in your everyday lives rather than just in a business setting?
Well, we use it in health and fitness. I mean, that's the easiest correlation for most people. It's very easy for them to understand health data. It's like, hey, can you imagine trying to lose weight and never stepping on a scale, never knowing your pant size, never looking in a mirror, never, having any feedback from anybody, right? That's all just data. That's just information about how you look and how you feel, right? So health is a very easy way for people to understand the value of data. One of the more obscure ways that AJ and I use data is in our relationship. So, for example, we have a lot of different metrics in our relationship. Like, for example, I've read or heard of, the 5 love languages. So AJ's love languages are physical touch and words of affirmation, which are my least favorite. and the ones that I don't have the most habit in, whereas I'm like service and quality time. We'll track how often I actually give him physical touch / words of affirmation. And when we were first starting to date, it was abysmal. It was terrible. I was a horrible human being and a terrible girlfriend. But it was one of those things where, again, like you said, Elliot, it's like people kind of skew things in their mind, right? You see things one way through your rose-colored glasses, and then you look at numbers and you're like, oh, that's not the reality at all. And so what we started doing is tracking how often I would do that, and it would be like weeks would go by without me giving him a compliment, And so what we did is we used that to change. We used the data as feedback because really our entire motto is we use information to change human behavior. Right? In business and in personal lives. So using that feedback mechanism of the data showing how terrible I was at physical touch and words of affirmation, we're like, okay, so how can we change this? Because when AJ doesn't feel loved, there are other things that then happen, right? He then gets, insecure because I'm not I'm not showing him in the way that he interprets love. And so of course it's going to make him feel, insecure or
does she not love me?
Yeah, exactly.
Your mind starts to go places. It's like a low battery on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Like I'm in that yellow or red space. I'm like, I need to get refilled here.
Mm-hmm.
So when it wasn't happening, there would be
things that would came up. Yeah, exactly. Reactions would come up from him, and I'd be like, what's wrong with you? And then we'd look at the data and be like, oh,
there we go.
My bad. My bad.
You haven't touched me for a while. You don't even cuddle with me.
What? I'm not a cuddler. So anyway, so to how we change behavior is then, okay, great. So I know that that's not my strong point. So how can I go and change that? So at 3:33 p.m., I have an alarm that goes off on my cell phone that says, go give AJ physical touch and words of affirmation. And I'll be, sitting there on my laptop working, and he'll be across the room, and that alarm will go off, and I'll have to awkwardly shift the laptop, come out of my hole and come and go over, and I'll awkwardly give him a hug, rub the back of his neck and give him, oh, you look great today, or oh, I appreciate you, anything like that. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, I feel loved, right? Even though he knows that it's not my natural state and that I'm doing it out of love, but I have to be reminded about it. He still feels grateful. And
also the amount of effort that you're putting in to make sure that AJ's feeling comfortable, that effort's worth an awful lot, isn't it?
It is. Even if I hear it, I'll be on the 3rd floor and I'll hear her alarm go off and I'll know what's coming. I don't care that she had to set her alarm. I'm going to get my fill. Yeah. I'm going to feel really good. I'm going to rub my neck, my head, or whatever, and I'm going to be happy.
It's like Pavlov.
But even the fact the alarm was set, that shows the intention to really trying hard on the relationship, doesn't it? So I just think what a wonderful idea. And that really is an excellent book. So what we'll do is we'll make sure I think it's been mentioned a few times on the show. I'll make sure the link's there as well.
We use all sorts of data in our relationship. We use that for, the physical touch, words of affirmation.
We habit tracker. So we use,
we have a habit tracker.
Coach.me. There's a couple others we recommend as well, but a
couple apps,
tracking sex, tracking workout, tracking intermittent fasting, tracking
quality time. How much time do you actually have not working together, or not talking about the kids, or not talking about the business, or not talking about, the day in and day outs. Mm-hmm. How much time is it where it's just you two?
What's left to talk about, Meaghan?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the habit people fall into, and then they wonder why their love life is dead. Yeah. So, just tracking those things that are important to you. I had a mentor that once said to me, I don't care who you say you are, what you say you are. I care who you say you are. And what you say you are. or what you say is important to you. Show me your schedule and your checkbook, and I'll tell you what's important to you, because where you spend your time and your money, that's data. And it's like, hey, if I spend 90% of my week at work and only 2% on my kids, what does that say about me? It's a prioritization, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. It's a story. Again, data tells a story. Abstract variables in our life that most people think are non-quantitative, right? We can just track it by saying yes or no, or how much time did I spend on this, right? I think I'm a charitable person, but when was the last time I volunteered? How much am I actually donating of my time or my money, right? So tracking those things that we think are not trackable, it gives you a story, and it allows you to see who you are and what's important to you, both in your business, your personal life, and your health.
Where can people find out about you if they're listening to this and want to learn more about utilizing these tools for their businesses?
Praxismetrics.com is our main website. That's Praxis, and then metrics, metrics.com. That's our main company. There's also our data-rich blog there. So there's going to be lots of really great content on there. Facebook.com/praxismetrics, and on LinkedIn. We're both there.
Or if you wanted to connect with us personally too, AJ does, kind of coaching for men and how to optimize their health and their well-being and, productivity as well. So they can hook up with us personally through Instagram or LinkedIn. It's just AJ Yager, Yager, and Meaghan Connell. Mine's a little bit trickier to spell, so we'll just put it in the show notes.
We'll get them in the notes for you. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of that. There's a lot, I'm sure, of people listening to this just thinking, oh, yeah, perhaps I should be a little bit more honest about what I should be tracking for my business.
And we would love to hear. We would love to help. Honestly, just reach out. If it's a getting started thing or there's business questions, we really want to help out your audience.
Well, as I say, really, really appreciate you guys coming on. I know what you do is awesome, and I just wanted to make sure everyone got a chance to hear about it so they can share in this as well. So I'll speak to you guys again soon, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So really fun to have AJ and Meaghan on the show. They're a wonderful couple. I always enjoy speaking with them. If you have any interest, I really recommend checking out their website and just having a look at these different areas, perhaps of your business, where collecting that data and having it analyzed professionally might make a big difference for you. You can check out the website on the link that we're going to put into the podcast page. Now, if you'd like to check out any of my coaching or any of my products, head over to elliotrowe.com.